Hi, I'm photographer David Flores, and welcome to the B&H Photo live stream discussion of the Sony A7R III camera. So excited to have our panelists here, all incredible online influencers and Sony Collective members. And before we get going here, I just want to kind of go around and have you all introduce yourselves, all the way from Brooklyn, New York to Manhattan. What's up, Dave?
Long commute for me.
Yes.
My name is Dave Krugman. I'm a Brooklyn-based photographer, writer, and social media strategist. I go by Dave.Krugman on Instagram, and I'm also a member of the Alpha Imaging Collective.
Awesome. Welcome. Hey, Erin. How are you?
I'm Erin Sullivan. I also go by Erin Outdoors on my social channels and my blog. I'm a photographer and a writer, sharing stories from the outdoors and traveling about living adventurously.
You just had an incredibly long flight getting back to the United States. Where have you been
Yeah,
recently?
so I was most recently in Myanmar, photographing some incredible things, temples, and just beautiful there.
Can't wait to take a look at that.
So jealous of you. So jealous. Me too. So my name is Manny Ortiz. I am a portrait photographer based out of Chicago, Illinois. I'm also a YouTube content creator, so that's what I specialize in. And the past 2 weeks I spent with the A7R III, I'm really excited to talk about it because I'm really impressed. Yeah.
Awesome.
So my name is Eric Rubens. I'm a San Diego-based photographer and videographer and specialize in travel lifestyle. Just got back from Jordan and the Azores recently, and I've just been loving the experience with the camera, so happy to talk about it and excited to be here.
And we're breaking, by coming out to the East Coast here, we're kind of breaking your surfing streak right now?
A little bit, yeah. I don't think I would last long on the water out here, so I just didn't even go for it.
Sorry about that, man. Well, welcome all to our discussion. Thank you all so much for being here. Can't wait to take a look at your content and talk through the camera. B&H is shipping a ton of these. We should have all pre-orders for the A7R III out by mid-December, which is super, super cool. Now, what we're doing today is answering your questions. So if you have them, anything about photography, anything about the A7R III, please tweet them at us using the hashtag BHPhotoLive. That's BHPhotoLive. And if you send us in that question with that hashtag, you will automatically be entered into a drawing to win a brand new A7R Mark III body. And we'll do that at the end of our live stream. So again, send your questions to us. That's with the hashtag BHPhotoLive. Okay, now before we jump in and talk the nuts and bolts of the camera, we're gonna have Jake give us a rundown of some of the specs, some of the new features. So go ahead and take it away, Jake.
Thanks, David. Recently, I sat down with Mike Bubalo from Sony to talk about the exciting release of Sony's new camera, the A7R Mark III. So in case you missed it, here's a quick rundown of the camera's new features, then I'll pass it back to our awesome panel. 2 words, image quality. It's the same 42 megapixel sensor, but now it has a brand new processor and front LSI, which gives you 15 stops at dynamic range in your stills, better high ISO performance, up to 32,000 to be exact, and a new feature called Pixel Shift, where the sensor can literally take 4 consecutive pictures, each one sampling all 3 colors, red, green, and blue. The A7R III is a brand new shutter that will give you 10 frames per second using both mechanical or electronic shutter if you need silent shooting, all while utilizing autofocus and auto exposure. Speaking of, the new and improved autofocus still uses 399 phase detection autofocus points, but they increased the contrast points to 425, essentially doubling your focusing speed, which pairs nicely with the enhanced IAF, said to rival the Sony A9, which is fast. Now you may notice the camera body looks really similar to the Sony A9, and that's no accident, because camera performance was fundamental in the design of the A7R Mark III, which now uses the same battery as the A9, has dual SDXC card slots, a joystick on the back for touch to autofocus, and the same viewfinder as the A9. I got to hold it myself, and feels really nice. If that wasn't enough, this camera also shoots Ultra HD 4K up to 30 frames per second on a full frame sensor with no line skipping, no pixel binning, plus they added S-Log3 and S-Gamma 3 cine. It will also shoot 120 frames per second in HD. It really feels like Sony took the best from Sony A9's professional performance and the best from Sony A7R II's image quality, fused them together to make one phenomenal camera. Okay, well that's it for me. Now let's hear from our very talented panel that actually got to use the camera. Back to you, David.
All right, hey, thank you so much, Jake. Now, it sounds like an amazing camera on paper, tons of awesome specs, tons of awesome features, but You all have actually had the opportunity to use the camera in the field for your work, and I think we're gonna jump in, kind of get into that. So this first question that we have coming in through the Twitters is, if you only had 90 seconds to talk about your favorite new feature of the Sony A7R III, what feature would you choose? I'm gonna up the ante on this one a little bit. Instead of 90 seconds, I'm gonna say, like, what can you say in one sentence? Feature-wise, that jumps out at you. And Dave, maybe we'll start with you and work our way down the line.
Sentence, Dave.
One sentence, but I'm going to have one introductory sentence, if I can, if I may. It's such a leap forward that it's hard to pick one feature. But if I had to say something that really stood out to me as a huge improvement, I think for me it was the battery life. I'm used to taking 3 or 4 batteries with me every day for the A7R II. It was just kind of like an unfortunate thing that the batteries were a little smaller. With this new battery that is the same one as the A9, I mean, I can shoot all day and still have half the battery left at the end of the day, and that just blew my mind.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What about for you, Aaron? Like, what jumps out at you?
Yeah, I'm gonna also have a couple of sentences. So I was joking that this camera feels like an extension of my body. The Mark II, I felt like there were a few features that I really wanted. One of those was a faster autofocus that would really catch my subjects when and where I needed it. So this one does that really well. And then also the improved viewfinder is really awesome. Just really, you feel like you're really in the vortex when you're looking through that. So it's cool.
It's awesome. It's awesome. Man.
It's really hard to focus on one thing on this camera, to be honest. But the two things that really stood out to me.
Well done.
Unbelievable.
We're really
The two
following
things-
the rubric here. I like it.
Yeah.
Right.
The autofocus performance, especially when you're shooting a subject that's backlit. The A7R II struggled, especially in eye autofocus, really struggled getting that eye in a backlit scene, and the R3 just did an amazing job with that. So that I really like that. And also, I love the buffer performance on the A7R III. With the R2, you take a shot and you'd have to wait a couple of seconds to review your image, and that kind of slowed down the process. With the R3, I'm able to take multiple shots and still able to review my images really quickly. So, like that.
Like it.
So going last, a couple of mine have already been taken, but not for me. I think I would just say the video specs are what makes this a truly incredible camera for me. I mean, I think in the past I saw a lot of my friends using the A7R II for photo, and they've leaned pretty heavily on the A7S II for video. And a good example is, like, next week I have a project that I need to do a lot of photo and video, and having something like this that has all the features of the A7S II kind of rolled into an incredible photo camera makes it truly an all-in-one body. So now I feel fully confident bringing one camera to jobs like that.
Yeah. That's awesome. There's a lot to love here. So our next question, how big of an upgrade is the A7R III from the A7R II? Is the IAF as good as advertised? And Manny, maybe we can start with you here, because IAF is really something that I think matured a lot with the A9. But here you're into a higher resolution situation, and I'm just wondering, like, as a portrait photographer, is it working for you in the same way as the A9? Is it faster, slower? What are you finding there?
It's funny because I feel like a lot of people still don't know that this feature exists. As much as we talk about it, there's still people that don't know about it. And it's something that completely changes how I shoot. You know what I mean? The fact that you don't have to recompose your shot, you can just turn the camera and you lock focus on that eye. I used a adapted lens. So now you can use this camera with Canon lenses and get native eye autofocusing. That's something that you could only previously do with Sigma lenses using a Sigma adapter. So that's a really cool feature. But the eye autofocus is definitely improved on the R3, just like the A9. It sticks to that eye so good. Even when the person closes their eye, it's gonna just stick to that eye. And in backlit scenes, I definitely noticed an improvement as well with the eye autofocus. So
that's awesome. Now, Aaron, like for travel, I'm assuming you may delve with the IAF as well.
Yeah,
How are you finding that working for you?
It's just a lot faster and more reliable. I think the first part of that question, how much of an upgrade is it? I feel that so many of the just delay in my workflow that I experience sometimes, just with some of the things that Manny just mentioned with the Mark II, has been solved with the Mark III, including the eye autofocus.
Now, Dave, you shoot a lot of street too, and my question is, with this IAF or with the focusing system, to viewfinder EVF or to screen? How do you compose? How are you shooting?
Honestly, the EVF is something that has completely changed the way I approach photography. It's interesting to me. This, like, when you look through the viewfinder, it's almost like you're looking at augmented reality, right? There's this overlay over the whole world that tracks people's eyes. It gives you the right exposure. It shows you the depth of field, and it's just, coming from a DSLR history, it's something that completely changed my workflow. And I think to answer the first part of that question, it's a leap forward from the A7R II because there's so many incremental improvements that all add up to an incredible advancement in technology.
That's fantastic.
Still recovering from a couple of those sunset photos that you
Oh,
got.
yeah.
They're beautiful. Where did you shoot those?
I just got back from Buenos Aires, Argentina. It was absolutely beautiful, and it was a great place to test out the camera.
I need to get out more.
It's incredible.
I need to get that memory card.
Well, we're focused on answering your questions. So again, please tweet them at us. Use that hashtag BHPhotoLive, and you'll automatically be entered in a drawing to win a brand new A7R III camera at the end of our live stream. Okay, so you all ready for another one here?
Let's do it.
Okay. So this is an important one. With resolution, there's sort of this idea that you can't shoot it quickly or you're going to overfill a buffer. So the question comes in here: does the camera capture 10 frames per second when shooting uncompressed 14-bit RAW files? Anybody want to jump in on this one?
Yeah, it does.
It can definitely do it.
It's so fast. It's actually kind of unbelievable to me. I've been playing around with different ideas and concepts using that fast frame rate. If I'm just walking around typically, I probably wouldn't shoot on burst mode, but I created this image here that you see just to kind of showcase in one frame what does 10 frames per second even look like in high resolution. Mm-hmm. So I worked with my dancer friends here, and we decided to kind of do a illustration of what that looks like. What does 1.5 seconds look like in one frame? So it's just a fun way to kind of see how much imagery you can capture in that one quick burst.
And an important thing here too is that image has incredibly high resolution, which is different than a lot of the fast frame rate cameras that are out there.
Right.
For your work, what's the advantage there in that higher resolution?
The high resolution of these cameras is fascinating to me because you can take one image and then because the resolution is so high, you can crop that into 20 different compositions. And it opens up a whole new side of the photograph in post-processing when you can really dial in and just find these new moments and these new areas of detail and texture that, maybe I shot at 35 millimeters and I can make it look like a telephoto shot. Mm-hmm. So it really opens up a whole new world of possibilities.
I wanted to talk with the panel about this because you all create so much content for yourselves and for others on social. That flexibility is really important. Maybe you can talk a little bit about your process in post-production and reframing the image.
Yeah, I mean, I can kind of harp on what Dave just said there. Is having the 42 megapixels, I don't think a lot of people understand how powerful that is. I took a couple of shots on my last trip to Hawaii, and having that amount of resolution in a shot, I was able to crop into probably realistically 5% of the shot and grab individual coves on a beach and recompose. I probably got 3 or 4 posts out of a single frame. And just thinking about that is that it's pretty amazing. And there's no drop off in quality when I cropped in that sharp. I mean, I was on a safari in Africa, and the lion was way beyond the focal length that I could, capture it comfortably. So I almost thought at first that I didn't get the shot. And I cropped into such a small percentage of the screen and had a perfectly usable shot of the lion's face. I mean, that resolution is just unbelievable.
Manny, like with a portrait, do you find yourself trying to frame everything up in camera, or do you make some adjustments in post on
Well, I definitely try to get it right in camera. Mm-hmm. Always try to get it right in camera, but that's always not the case, you know what I mean? And sometimes limitations of the scene that you're shooting in, you can't get up closer or you have to stand farther back. I mean, having that flexibility is just, it's really hard to go back to 24 megapixels sometimes. I like the workflow of 24, but 42 gives you so much flexibility in post to reframe your shot. I can take a tight portrait, or I can, you know what I mean? It allows me to kind of change everything in post if I need to, and I love that.
How about for you, Aaron? Do you start wide and kind of work your way in, or are you trying to get it right?
I try to get it right in camera, but it's really nice to know that I can crop in if and when I need to, and I do often crop for social. I just like to have everything right, because if I want the option of printing that really big, then it's there, which is really nice. So.
Yeah. All right, so one of the questions I think that pops up a lot is about dynamic range, and this is one of the best ones that was sent in here. I read that this camera has a very high dynamic range. How does it behave in outdoor photography? And maybe we'll start with you, Eric. Kind of
I'm typically shooting after the sun is set, so I have a very bright, vivid, colorful sky, and I've lost a lot of light in the foreground or the bottom part of my shot typically. So I lean on that dynamic range all the time. I mean, I'm constantly bringing a lot of detail out of the shadows. I'm toning down the highlights a little bit to try to maximize the color I can get out of the shot. I shoot a bit underexposed, and oftentimes I think, I may have pushed it a little bit too dark, and I'm just always amazed in post-production how much detail I can bring out. I can almost make it look like it was a perfectly lit scene from what seems like a pure black pixel. So it's pretty unbelievable.
Let's talk about that for a second, because a lot of folks, I think, when they're shooting landscape or things that are highly detailed, they'll do a little bit of underexposure. Why do something like that? Aaron, I know you underexpose a little bit.
I do. It's just easy to bring that stuff up. I can rely on it. I trust it. Even in these images that you're seeing right now, I brought that bridge up quite a bit. That was pretty shadowed. So it's definitely something that I rely on a lot in my work, is that dynamic range.
I agree with all those sentiments. I generally find that it's easier to pull, just in general, it's easier to pull shadows up. Mm-hmm. I tend to shoot pretty dark in general. Mm-hmm. It's easier to pull those shadows than to bring the highlights back. But I've found that, especially with these new files, I think you have an incredible amount of flexibility. Even a couple shots I accidentally overexposed and was like, oh man, I really missed that shot. And I was able to pull it all the way back down until it looks like a completely proper exposure.
It can definitely be a lifesaver.
Yeah.
As well. It's like not only are we using this, are we keeping it in mind all the time, but when we do make mistakes or something, we can rely on it for that too, which is really nice.
It happened. Talk about the viewfinder here. It's like I'm wondering how much of that you're seeing on an electronic viewfinder, because now we're in mirrorless. We can kind of gauge more or less what's going on with the exposure, either with the rear screen or looking through the EVF, and how does that play into making your decision for exposure?
For me, I love the EVF for the live preview. Because it really just, I don't have to wonder, what is this going to look like in post, or what am I going to have to work with when I finally can get the software involved. I know that if I'm within 3 stops of a proper exposure, I'm going to be just fine and be able to bring things up with no noise. So having the electronic viewfinder to see kind of like what is the block of wood that we're going to carve from is a very great feature.
Yeah, I completely trust it. I know that what I see in my viewfinder is what I'm going to get when I bring it into post. And the improved viewfinder on the Mark III comparatively to the Mark II, which was something that I already loved, is such a bonus. Yeah.
I think that the electronic viewfinder has completely taken away test shots from my vocabulary. I don't do test shots anymore. You know what I mean? It's like, with a DSLR, you might need to take a couple test shots because you don't know what your photo looks like. With the EVF, you see your photo. It's like, you can just start shooting right away.
Right.
You know what I mean? And you know what you're getting. It's pretty self-explanatory. And I think it's amazing. I think more people need to try it out. People that are kind of stuck in their old ways, I think maybe people should try the electronic viewfinder. You know what I mean? It's really amazing. Yeah.
I think consistently the first thing that you always hear when you show people that for the first time is whoa. I mean, I've heard that so many times. It's pretty amazing. I mean, like you guys were saying, test shots, I mean, that doesn't exist anymore. Being able to accurately see the picture has just changed so much for me. And I think that is, more than anything, probably one of the reasons why I switched in the first place, was just having that right there. I could change the settings with all the customizable keys, dial in my own shutter speed, aperture, ISO, and see the live changes in my eye. That was just, I couldn't even process it at first, how nice that was. And I didn't even know I was missing that until I had it.
I have to add to that because it's funny. I just realized something I always do is, even when I'm shooting in the streets or people in Argentina were like, oh, take my picture. And the number one thing I love to do is after I take the picture,
Show it to them.
you show it to them, and then they look at the back of the screen by default.
Right.
I say, no. And I cover that up. I'm like, look.
Yes.
I'm like, it'll switch. Look in.
I tell everybody that too.
And without fail, it's that reaction of, whoa, because it's
Yeah.
this three-dimensional, super dynamic image that you get to look at super up close, and it just kind of takes over, like almost like
I
virtual
feel like
reality.
you're in a movie theater.
Yeah. It's very immersive, so.
It takes people a minute too when I'm traveling and I show them. They're like, "What?" Like they don't understand
Yeah.
that I'm telling them to look in the camera,
Yeah.
and it really does blow their mind. So it's cool.
Composing with it too, I think it's worth mentioning that electronic viewfinders have come a long way. Like one of the things that kind of put me off, before moving to a mirrorless system, was the lag that was there with an electronic viewfinder. And with the A9, I didn't feel anything, and now with the A7R III, this is a different kind of ball game. It's really fast.
I think something Aaron said earlier about the extension of your body, it definitely does feel that way. It feels like this is just an enhanced way to see the world. I almost wish I could look through that like just all day, but
That's a great way
someday.
to see things. All right, so our next question here is, how is the A7R III in the battery life department compared to previous generations? Now, we've touched on this being a new battery, but any horror stories from the old days? Anybody want to?
I had 9 batteries.
9 batteries?
Yeah, for some of the longer trips, to Africa or places where chargers aren't as accessible, you have to be prepared for those types of shoots. And the battery lasts so long. I mean, typically in the past, shooting video obviously is naturally something that kills the battery pretty quick. Mm-hmm. And I was able to go from a sunrise shoot in Laguna Beach, shooting a lot of video, a lot of pictures, driving down to San Diego for sunset, full day shoot down there, photos and video. And I still had over half the battery. So that right there, I was just like, whoa, this is a noticeable improvement. And I mean, not being able to carry 9 batteries is
pretty solid.
So it's a good thing.
It's a good look.
Well, Manny, for you, like, how many batteries do you burn, like on a typical
I would at
portrait
least
shoot?
take 3 to 5 batteries for any shoot. And I think that my wife used to get mad at me because I would take out her Glade plugins out of the wall to charge a battery.
You make her carry them in the push?
Huh?
Did you make her carry the batteries for you?
No. Yeah, so the Glade plugins, I would take them out and put my battery. She used to give me so much grief for that, but I needed 3 to 5 batteries every shoot. And now with the A7R III, I can take 1 battery and be confident that I could pretty much get through the whole day with 1. I mean, it's crazy. It changes my entire workflow. You know what I mean? I don't have to worry about, do I have enough batteries? I can just use 1.
And Aaron, like for you, like travel switching is a drag, especially if you're
Yeah.
into the subject or in the right place.
Yeah,
And-
it's nice with this one. I can get through pretty much the whole day with just one. And definitely I've had many trips where, in cold environments, you're putting all your batteries like on your person and sleeping with them in your sleeping bag so that
crazy.
it doesn't drain the battery life. I'll still be doing that, but just with less.
With less.
now.
Okay.
Yeah.
You have more real estate in the bag
Yeah,
for
you know.
you. That's nice. That's
Yeah,
really
it was
nice.
funny. When I was in Argentina, I was with a couple other photographers that shoot on different systems. And they eventually had to be like, we get it, the battery's great. But I was so
Like,
blown
stop
away by the
talking,
change.
Dave.
And they were just like, yeah, okay, it's fine. I was like, but I still have 70% battery and it's been 5 hours. What's going on? So it really is, it's a drastic improvement.
Now, are you all A9 users also? Are you using A9?
I have it on loan.
So that's also really cool that you are only carrying one. Like now, you can carry one type of battery, for both speed and the high resolution, which I think is that's nice. I don't know. Working with multiple batteries, I always mess something up or muck something
It's
up.
a much
there.
needed change. I'm very happy.
Nice.
Really happy with it.
All right, well, let's jump in. Our next question here, does the Sony A7R III have RAW support? Okay, so I think this question is asking us, can you open the RAW files like in Lightroom and Capture One right out of the box?
I think with any major release of a camera, there's always kind of like the software companies have to play a little bit of catch up.
Mm-hmm.
But right now I've been editing in Capture One and using that program. So yeah.
Going pretty well. Other folks?
Yeah, I
Same thing.
edited everything in Capture One, and I was able to. The processing of the files was incredibly quick, which was surprising with the resolution. I was expecting a little bit of a delay load in the files and stuff, but was pretty amazed how quick they came up and how easily it was to edit them.
Been editing in Capture One, but looking forward to the Lightroom support also.
Yeah, but then,
Definitely.
yeah.
I'm definitely looking forward to the Lightroom support. I got my workflow. It's my workflow. I don't want to change it, but Capture One has been okay for now. Waiting for that Lightroom support.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That'd be good.
Yeah. And like you were saying, Dave, this is pretty typical. It's
Yeah.
a new camera. You got to wait just a little bit.
Yep.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about video. How has the A7R III made improvements over its predecessor, the A7R II, while shooting video? Will it make my life as a filmmaker easier if I purchase it instead of the previous generation? And Eric, maybe we can start with you on this one.
Yeah, I mean, one thing for me that I was always missing on the A7R II was I felt a little bit limited in the frame rate. I couldn't get that 120 frames per second footage, and oftentimes I would borrow, my friend's A7S II, or I would go rent one for a shoot, just to kind of be able to have that flexibility. Mm-hmm. And the fact that they rolled it into this body has just kind of answered all of my needs. So as you can see, I was able to, finally mix in that buttery slow-mo footage that, makes it a little more cinematic. And yeah, the dynamic range on the video was unbelievable. I color graded everything after. I found like a lot of flexibility and being able to push, the blacks up a little bit or the highlights down, and it answered everything that was kind of missing in the A7R II for video for me.
That's really clean. Like looking at the video here, 120 frames per second. Usually, you get some kind of chopping. You get that kind of.
Yeah, no, I didn't experience that at all. I was overall incredibly pleased with it. And like I said, I do a lot of jobs where I'm looking to produce a lot of photo content, and I'm also looking to do kind of like a highlight video from the trip. So this just is an all-in-one body for me that's going to make that so much easier.
That's awesome. Manny, for you?
Yeah, the video, the improvements, I feel like it took some of the best features out of the A6500 in terms of video autofocus. And you know how gimbals are getting pretty popular nowadays. Everyone's filming on gimbals, and one of the things that you need when filming on a gimbal is good AF in video. That's one thing that the A7R II definitely lacked in. It wouldn't track subjects very well. That's why I always resorted back to my 6500. But now the A7R III, the improvement is pretty drastic over the R2 in terms of AF in video. So now you can confidently put the A7R III on a gimbal and know that it's going to track, because the tracking is pretty awesome. I had my wife run toward me and run back, and it tracked her so good.
The touchscreen too.
And the touchscreen.
Really nice feature that they added.
Oh yeah.
Talk about that, because it's not. It's
yeah, so
something
I mount the camera on like a Ronin for stabilization, and being able to, popping around a corner, having the focus be on the rocks in front of you, and then being able to slowly pan around there and tap to grab focus on the subject, instead of relying on, fidgeting with the autofocus settings. It was just so nice to have that. Something that was really missing on the A7R II, and I'm so glad that they incorporated it on this one.
Yeah, and it's saving you like that extra piece of kit it saves you weight if you're putting it on a stabilizer.
Yeah, anything to simplify the kits. Going back to the batteries, just making this a smaller package. That's already one of the biggest reasons why we all enjoy using mirrorless, is just the small, compact package. And being able to take down the amount of accessories you need to go to a shoot it's always a good thing.
All right, so this is a video question that I have for you both. To S-Log or not to S-Log? That is the question. So when you're
famous philosophical question.
There you go. Well, S-Log for folks that don't know, it's a really flattened out profile. You can really push your color grading and post production on the back end, how that final image gets resolved. But there's instances where that's maybe not always the best thing to do, and maybe you all can tackle that. Manny, are you an S-Log or are you a non-S-Log?
Depends.
Depends. Okay.
Depends. I do use LUTs to color grade my footage. I think it just depends on the situation if I want to shoot S-Log or not. If I really want a cinematic look, I think I'll shoot S-Log just so I can play with the colors a little bit more. But if I don't want to get too intensive in my color grading, I'll shoot either another color profile or straight out of camera, because I know the colors are going to be pretty good. So.
Right now, Eric, why would you not want to spend a ton of time?
Yeah, so color grade? For me personally, I'm typically shooting pretty vivid scenes, and I find the S-Log to be a very flat profile, and in my experience going back and trying to color grade that after, I haven't really found the true color that I was hoping to get. So I kind of just use a picture profile that mutes the contrast, saturation, and sharpness a little bit. I use picture profile 3 quite a bit. It is a flatter profile, but I find that when I go back and color grade it after in Premiere or Magic Bullet or one of those programs, I'm able to more accurately get the results I want. And I think that if you expose your shot pretty accurately, you don't really need to push the dynamic range too much. So having the freedom that S-Log gets you, to push it a couple more stops, isn't always needed for me. I'm fine overexposing a sky a little bit for a more dreamy look, and I'm fine going a little bit darker, like in a cave, because it is a dark cave, and I'm fine selling that and giving like a little bit of a moodier shot. I don't need to pump the detail on, in the cave and stuff like that. So,
when you're testing, when you're doing your metering, are you using the electronic viewfinder, or are you finding yourself more on the rear screen?
I'm typically on the rear screen. I'm going from a lot of different angles. So, I mean, I oftentimes shoot from right off the ground with the Ronin. So I'll pull out the screen, and it's nice that it kind of flips up, and I can get like a nice angle holding it directly on the ground. So or sometimes I'm shooting high and I'm angling the screen down at me. So I'm all over the place with the angles.
I'm the same way. Same way. And talking about that, the screen, when you're shooting video with the A7R III in 4K, you're not getting the dim screen that you used to get on the 6500. And that's one thing, when I would put my 6500 on a gimbal, the screen would turn so dark, it'd be really hard to see your exposure, and you'd have to double check, put your eye to the viewfinder. And with the R3 now, you don't, I mean, kind of like the A9 has that as well, that where the screen doesn't get dim. And now you can properly see your screen shooting 4K. That's
That
awesome.
is very nice.
Yeah.
All right. Next video question in here. I work for a nonprofit. We make videos for music, life transformations, films, etc. We shoot in a lot of low light. The A7S II does an amazing job for low light. How does the new A7R III work in a low light situation? We've talked about this a little bit, but you know, we're kind of comparing S's to R's here, and just how y'all feeling about this?
I mean, I shot in a very dimly lit cave, and the focus tracking worked perfectly. It's kind of been my only experience with it so far, really pushing its capabilities in low light. But I cranked the ISO up probably to 3200 or 6400 in those shots, and I saw almost no noise. I mean, the shots were very clean, totally usable. So I was extremely happy with the low light performance.
That's awesome. Right now, Aaron and Dave, I want to ask you about this, like in creating stills. One of the things, like going to such a high resolution sensor, is previously you have like not as high a ceiling, like when you're shooting at a higher ISO. How are you all feeling there? Like, what?
I feel like this is the first camera where I don't even think about ISO so much anymore, because there's like the threshold is so high. Like I can go up to 6400 and barely see any noise. That it's just less of a factor when I'm deciding, like, you know, which part of that triangle of exposure I'm going to work with. I can just kind of just be like, oh, well, 3200, like no problem. And shooting in almost complete darkness, you know, with especially with like the 35-1.4 lens at, you know, ISO 6400, like there's no scene I'm going to be in where I need more light than that, you know? So it's been really, really fun to just not worry so much about that sensitivity anymore.
How about for you, Aaron? Like,
I go to ISO 3200 without really thinking about it too much.
Yeah,
I feel pretty confident about those.
So
those things.
I did some testing in my backyard with my wife. I asked her to come outside. I shot from 6400 to 16,000 on the R2 and the R3 using the same lens, and I was a little skeptical. I didn't think that there would be that much of an improvement, and I noticed a slight improvement in low light. I noticed it in the shadows for sure, in the darker areas. I did notice a slight improvement, and it's just good to, I mean, the R2 is already good in low light. I think that they definitely improved it on the R3. So
now let's talk, like, kind of swing that the other way. When you're like at a lower ISO, what are you finding? Like, and this is a question, you could approach this either from photo or from video. Like, how are you feeling shooting lower down? Is the quality?
Yeah, I think it's just the overall image quality that comes from, you know, the adding up of all the little improvements. It's just stunning what you get out of this camera. I think something about the ISO that I love is when you have more leeway with the ISO, like you can go up to 6400 or 3200 without even thinking about it. That enables you to play a lot more with shutter speed and aperture too. So like now I know that maybe a shot where typically I'd have to shoot it at 2.8 because I'm handheld, and now I can go all the way up to like f8 and get more of a foreground because I have more leeway on the ISO side. Or same with shutter speed. I can, if I'm shooting a fountain or water, I can get the shutter speed up to like in the thousands, and then I can freeze motion in a way that just wasn't possible before because I have so much room to breathe with the ISO.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
For me, it's like the image quality of this camera is better, but what matters more, in my opinion, is all of the other things that contribute to that image. So the things like the autofocus, the things like the ergonomics, the joystick, stuff like that. The usability, is also what contributes to overall a better image, in my opinion.
So for me, like, I used to always bring a tripod on every single sunset shoot I would go on because, 10 minutes after the sun set, it was so dark that I had to push the ISO so high that I was basically like, okay, I need a tripod at this point moving forward. And I found that ever since the R2, I mean, the R2 is when I first realized this, but this camera is an even better example. I rarely go out with a tripod anymore, which is crazy to think because I see that as an essential part of a photo kit. But I mean, the performance of this, even 30 minutes after the sun sets, I was able to shoot everything handheld with complete confidence that the image was going to turn out with perfect resolution.
That's such a good point. Yeah, I don't use a tripod that much either because of that.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
All right, well, we're going to jump into a mirrorless question here. Y'all ready for that? Okay. Mirrorless and maybe a brand-oriented kind of question here. And I think a lot of y'all have gone through this. I think we can dig deep on this one. Sure. I'm leaving the Canon DSLR world for the new Sony A7R III. I'm a professional, and yet so many of my peers say that mirrorless cameras, including the new Sony A7R III, are not pro cameras. I do not agree with this, but why are so many people saying this?
Well, first of all, congratulations on the transition.
Welcome.
Welcome to the future. No, I'm kidding, but it's
No, you're not.
Personally, it is a professional camera. It's an incredibly powerful tool. I think people that are from the old guard and that are used to the only professional camera as a DSLR. I understand their loyalty, but we've reached a point in technology where the package has gotten so much smaller, so powerful, that I wouldn't personally ever go back to a DSLR considering the current state of the industry. I think that this camera is just a quantum leap ahead of everything, and the idea that it's not a professional camera is just, to me, just doesn't ring true.
I think building on what Dave said, a lot of people at first were so amazed that Sony was able to cram so many features of a traditional DSLR, twice the body size, into such a small package. So I think the perception in the industry at first, for people who hadn't really got their hands on the technology, was that there's no way that this body can fully capture all the features of a bigger body. Like, how can it fit into this small of a package? But getting your hands on it and putting it through the full set of tests, which I'm sure many you've done a ton, it's pretty amazing to see what this little guy can do. I mean, it's a truly powerful device.
We all shoot so many different types of things, for your clients and for social. What are those professional features that you need in there? Like, what is a professional feature for a camera? Maybe we can kind of look at that, Manny.
Well, I mean, professionals. A lot of professionals shoot weddings, and they need a camera, or I would assume that they need a camera with dual SD card slots. That's something that they always had a problem with in the previous generation. Now we have dual SD card slots. Being able to change your focus point on the fly, something I also struggled with the R2. Now you have the joystick. The simple things, you know what I mean? Now you can customize a button for a rate button. So when you ask someone, hey, can you just choose it makes less time in post-processing when you already know what image they like. So being able to customize a rate button, another good feature.
Yeah, it's so nice to have, especially when you're doing burst mode and you just reviewed 20 shots, being able to select the one you want, not have to go back into Lightroom and do the whole process again, go through them all.
Right. Oh yeah.
It's so nice.
And the last one I really want to speak on is people think that these cameras aren't built well. And that's one thing they associate with a pro body. And I shot in the rain for about 10 minutes when we were down in Mississippi for the AIC road trip. I shot in 10 minutes in the rain, pouring rain. And that was the camera. I took a picture of the camera so people could believe me. I put nothing over this camera. I shot. When I'm in the moment, I want to get the shot. So whatever. I shot in the rain, and the camera since then has worked perfectly. So.
Yeah, a lot of my New York street, like if I see a storm coming in, I immediately run out and go with my camera and go shoot. And my experience with this camera has been like, people always ask me, they're like, what do you do to protect your camera in the rain? I'm like, I wouldn't take my advice because I just let it get a little wet. And it hasn't been a problem for me in the past.
Yeah, I mean, I unfortunately was on the receiving end of a big wave, and my camera got very, very soaked, and it was saltwater, which is never a good combination, but dried it off, it worked perfectly. I also had it mounted on my chest doing a shoot while snowboarding, which doesn't always seem like the best idea, but at the time it seemed like a good idea, and unfortunately fell forward and buried it in snow, and once again it held up perfectly. And those were both, conditions that I was a little bit worried about. But yeah, I mean, it's still alive and beating.
Man. So Aaron, with all the travel that you do,
Yeah.
what are those core professional features that you need in a camera body?
I feel like it's everything that we've just hit on,
Mm-hmm.
of just everything that goes into the image quality, but the ergonomics are a big thing for me as well, the durability. I think it's everything that creates this formula that then creates that image.
We should talk about the grip just for a second here, because it was one of my favorite things about the A9 was that the body was actually just a tiny little bit larger, and it made the grip easier. The custom buttons a little bit bigger, a little bit more raised, so you can actually find what you're as a professional. Like, one of the things that I really want to be able to do is customize the camera to do everything.
I think that's such a good point, and that also goes back to the question from the person who is switching, is that you can customize basically every button on your camera to do what you want, to change the settings. So.
Yeah.
What are your customs, Aaron?
So my C1 and
Secrets
C2,
revealed.
so that's
Oh, we got to point these out. Let's see.
these buttons here. I don't know if I can switch.
It's shooting over the top. There we go. Yeah.
I do focus area and focus mode. Down at my C4, which is this one right here, that's turning my silent shooting on or off. And those are the important ones for me.
Yeah.
It's probably pretty cool because I bet each one of us has it customized in a completely different way. That's
Completely.
applicable to
Yeah.
our shooting.
Yeah.
Like I
Yeah.
have one button for my color profiles. I have one that dives into more video-centric options. And I mean, it's pretty cool how, like I said, you can customize it based on your exact shooting needs and what you tend to find yourself previously fidgeting with the most, going and dialing in.
Oh, yeah.
And just make that accessible by one
It just
click.
makes your workflow so much smoother.
So much quicker,
Yeah.
yeah.
Even the location of the buttons, it's I feel like they took so much consumer feedback and incorporated it into the design of the new camera. I know that one thing is they moved the record button from the side to kind of the back,
Yes.
which is, might not seem like a big deal, but I used to, have it on my hip, and all of a sudden I'd realize I've been recording video for half an hour.
Oh no.
And so to have that button more protected, and it's just like, it's great. And there's all these little tiny details that come together for this incredible bigger package.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. Like the core things the things that you want, like from a professional body, it's a long list. And for you all, it seems like the camera's really ticking off the boxes. Feeling good?
Absolutely.
All right. Okay, so we're going to take a few live questions now. We're coming up closer towards the end of our live stream here. So if you have questions and you'd like to be entered in that drawing to win an A7R III camera, please tweet them at us. Use that hashtag BHPhotoLive, and we're going to get into some of our new questions that are just coming in. We've touched upon this a little bit, but we're going to quantify this a touch here. How good is the weather seal on the A7R III? It seems like everybody feels pretty comfortable shooting with it without a housing or a protector.
I know a lot of people have kind of worried about that. I've put it through some pretty brutal conditions. I mean, I've been in really warm climates in Africa. I've been in very cold climates. I've never had a problem with any Sony body, really. I mean, I've got them wet, like I said, and I mean, it's never been a concern for me. Well, I don't know, what about you guys?
I haven't taken this one too far. I haven't pushed it too far since I've had it for a very limited time, but I have one on the way, and I can't wait to go out in the rain and the snow this winter and really capture the essence of New York.
Nice.
Yeah, your snow shots are amazing, dude.
Oh,
I definitely.
What about have you all put it in through anything inclement?
Well, I mean,
yet?
I put it through the rain. Other than that, I really haven't, any extreme heat or cold or anything like that. So, survived the rain.
We'll get there, right?
Yeah.
For me, I think dust is a big factor.
Yeah,
With a lot
huge.
of traveling and cameras in and out of different bags. I'm also an extremely clumsy individual. I don't know if anybody listening can relate. But I feel often like it's actually not the extreme places that I go, but it's just like me as a general liability.
You're the extreme.
I'm the extreme, right? So the fact that all of my Sony cameras have survived me is saying something as well.
I love it. All right, this is a great question. What is your favorite lens with the A7R III and why? Oh, this is a good
I
one.
love that.
Oh man.
It's easy.
Right now, my favorite lens, and it might just be my favorite lens in general, is the 70-200.
Do it. Damn.
So we can
We can have
share
you
it. But get your own. It's just such a fast incredible lens, and with the autofocus features of the A7R III, you have this really long reach, and you can just get so close to subjects, and such great fall off and depth of field, and that with the eye autofocus, I mean, you're just tack sharp always, and it's just a pleasure to shoot with. And I also just love the compression of a telephoto, especially when shooting street. It's something that I wasn't typically used to. So it just lets me reframe the world in a way that it's a lot more about layering, a lot more about depth, and a lot less about perspective and sweeping vistas. So I'm really excited about that.
I'm going to echo that. I mean, the 70 to 200, 2.8. But then second to that would be the 24 to 70 2.8 G Master also. As like those are my two main lenses for traveling. The 70 to 200 for all the reasons that Dave just said, of like the scenes that you can capture, the candid moments that you can take with that one, and then the 24 to 70 as like just an all around really solid lens.
That's awesome. Portraits, what do you do?
Yeah, so for the people that follow my YouTube channel, you know that I call my 85 millimeter my bread and butter, the 85 G Master. The reason why I love the 85 is just, it's more of the, almost like the human connection with the model. If I were with the 70 to 200, although I love the compression, I have to stand far back. And people that follow me on my channel know that I like to be able to communicate with the model, you know, without screaming, you know. So I love the distance to subject with the 85 millimeter, but I love the fall off at 1.4. It's crazy. It's ridiculous. So yeah,
That's awesome.
So for me, I have never shot wider than 16. I just recently picked up the 12-24 down here, and it just opened my eyes up. It's no distortion, like pretty much perfect sharpness on all corners, and I just seeing the world through such a wide angle and opening my eyes up to shots that I didn't think I could get because I couldn't fit them in the frame previously. The last few years that I've been going out and shooting these locations, I think this is going to be my new favorite for sure. I've only had it a few days, but it was unbelievable shooting with it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. All right, so quick ergonomic question here. How has the new joystick changed the way you use the A7R III versus the A7R II?
It's great. It's like instantaneously able to, you know, have the focus point fly across the frame. And I think that that's just total game changer. On the A7R II, I would find myself kind of, you know, if I needed quick transitions like that, I'd center focus and I'd quickly move my composition and hold the focus, which is like just like a cheap workaround.
Yeah.
I don't feel like I need to do that anymore. Like if I want to do some minimalist shot with like, you know, the subject in the lower left corner, I can just either, you know, frankly, I could just touch it if I wanted to on the screen, or I can just, with my thumb, quickly just hit down and to the left and you see that thing move and you're good.
It's hard to describe this, but the way your thumb purchases the joystick is different than on any other camera system. It just feels like, okay, I know. I got you there. I can move you around.
It removes a step, if not 2 or 3.
Yeah.
Saves time.
Definitely. It's huge. It's one of the things that I've missed when I jumped to Sony. I missed the joystick. And now I have the joystick, and now I'm happy because I can switch my focus points. It makes the process so much easier.
And even for reviewing photos and stuff like that. I mean, you can really fly through those photos a lot faster.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
That's really cool. All right, so Aaron, we got a question for you here.
Oh, great.
Okay. One for Aaron. When traveling, do you always have your laptop, or do you bring multiple cards and then do a dump once you return?
Yeah, great question. Thank you. So I do bring my laptop, and then I have 2 hard drives that I travel with, and then I try not to ever wipe my cards. And I try to, if possible, I do not always have Wi-Fi, but if I do, I try to upload my favorite RAW files to the cloud so that that's all covered.
Safe.
Yeah.
Safe in the cloud.
Yeah.
All right, so what are you guys travel with laptops?
Yeah.
Yeah, I always bring
I
it.
mean, it's always with me, with my camera.
Man,
Gotta
nice.
have it.
All right, so a couple more things I just want to talk through before we announce our winner. We're not quite there yet, but yeah, we're giving away a brand new Sony A7R III in just a few minutes here, which is very, very
It's
exciting.
gonna get lucky.
Yeah.
Hopefully my wife wins.
Yeah, I'm calling my friends.
You get her Glade plugins and the camera.
Well, I wanted to ask like a transition question because we have talked about like mirrorless now. There's that folks are starting to treat this like as a professional camera. Everyone here on panel is using the camera professionally. One of the legacy holdovers from SLR is glass, and I'm wondering how you manage that. Do any of you shoot with adapters and legacy lenses?
Yeah, so actually the reason I switched to Sony in the first place was because I started modifying old Leica glass that my grandfather had collected, and then he gave it to my father, who ended up giving it to me, which I was extremely fortunate. It was like getting a treasure chest or something. So when I was shooting DSLR, I was actually rebuilding the back ends of those lenses so that they'd be the right distance. And I'm basically ruining these great lenses. Fortunately, I didn't get too far in those projects. I only did a few. And then I read that the Sony, with a simple adapter ring, could do that exact thing. I didn't have to get an eyeglass kit and rebuild lenses. So I actually had a ton of Leica glass and Nikon from my past photo life. And I didn't even own a Sony lens for the first few months that I was shooting. And that's how easy it was for me to transition with adaptation. So I think if people are thinking about making the switch, but they don't want to completely refresh their whole setup, get the body and get an adapter. It's like, $100 and you can use all of your glass. And from what I hear about the IAF with the Canon lenses, that it's pretty good and it's an easy transition to make.
Definitely improved.
Yeah, it's a switch that I'm really glad I made and one that I wouldn't take back.
Nice. All right. Anybody else using adapted glass?
Well, I'm not big on adapted glass. It's not something that I like my native performance, right? I like my native performance, but I have tested Canon lenses on it. And in my opinion, in good light, they perform very similar to the A7R II, but in more challenging backlit, that's one thing that's how I shoot. So I tested it out, and it definitely is a small improvement in general, but the ability to use eye autofocus with the Canon lenses allows Canon users, to use some of the best features of Sony with their with their kit already. So that's a pretty cool thing.
And one last quick thing about legacy glass, because I actually love this so much. I have one lens that's like a f.1 50 millimeter lens, right? Wow. It's almost impossible to get a sharp shot, but if you're shooting on film, you have very limited leeway with that. But with the focus peaking features of the Alpha system, it's, you can zoom in to 400% and see exactly the exposure you're going to get and everything like that with a manual focus legacy glass lens. And that is just something that was never possible before with this glass. So I think that this system is actually breathing new life into legacy glass. And I think that's going to lead to a lot of interesting results.
A lot of people are dusting off their old lenses they see.
Yeah.
They see
I mean,
potential.
I'm telling you,
You know what's cool, Dave? I actually just reviewed an adapter that can focus manual lenses. Those
I have
old school
that.
lenses. Oh, you have one?
The M1, Tech Art?
There's a couple.
Tech
Yeah,
Art?
yeah. That's one. That's the other. Yeah.
Yeah. I can't wait to try that out.
Yeah.
Super
pretty
cool. You guys ready to give away a camera?
Yeah,
let's do it.
Yeah.
let's
Okay.
do it.
All right. Well, here we go. The winner of a brand new Sony A7R III camera is @Mellow Aaron M. Congratulations. We are so
Hey.
happy for you.
Congrats.
All right.
Buy a lottery ticket.
So excited for you there. And closing out, we have one last question. Kind of goes more towards photography and philosophy. So let's jump into that, and feel free to answer when you're ready. What is the most important feeling that you try to capture in each of your photos? And I think this is a fantastic question. This gets away from gear and.
That is a great question. Because, as much as we can talk about tech and gear, photography is a craft. And to me, there's a lot of different ways to approach this, but if I had to distill it down to one thing, I would probably say authenticity. When I'm doing street photography, I really want to capture real moments. I like my subjects to be unaware. But even if they are aware, in terms, in portraiture, I want to capture moments that are really real. And the less that's in our way, by having good technology that we can use very fluidly, the easier it is to capture that authenticity.
That's awesome.
I love those shots, Dave.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, for me, that feeling is wonder, for sure. So my background is in leading adventure programs for teenagers all over the world. And I used to take people on trips physically, and now I feel like I take them on trips through my images and my words. And if I can convey a story that communicates meaning and communicates connection, then hopefully to me, the viewer feels connected with that story. They feel empathy towards the person or the scene. They feel like they're there, and then maybe they care a little bit more about the world that they live in, and they might go explore it for themselves.
Do you feel that like when you're starting a project, is that the first thing like in the front?
Totally.
of your
It's
mind
how
to
can I
work
tell a
it
meaningful
through?
story? Yeah, for sure.
I love that. I love that.
I just want to make people look good. Bring the beauty out of the people.
Yeah.
Shoot me, please.
Yeah, I got you, man. Yeah, no,
Get a
that's
headshot where you're smiling.
I do. Yeah. I have teeth.
yeah. So that's what I mean. Portraiture. I love shooting people. I love the experience. Number one, of working with another person. I love bringing the beauty out of people, and I love someone when they look at my image, they can kind of feel like, what is she feeling? You know, I like to bring out certain emotions in certain photos. You know what I mean? And that's just why I love it so much.
Can you speak to that conversation? Because this isn't talked about, I think, enough in portraiture, but it really is like it's a conversation between the photographer and the person sitting, and you're both kind of crafting and making the thing. How's that conversation go for you? You talk about emotions. Do you set the poses up? Like how does that work for you?
I'm leaning away from posing. When I got into portraiture, I was posing too much, and that was a problem because my photos were just very stale. I think that by directing a model, asking them to pretend like almost like she's an actress. Okay, I want you to give me this. Pretend like you're shy, or you're waiting on a bus and you're cold, or and then she'll give you kind of like a constricted kind of pose, and it's just those kind of things that can make you feel almost like an authentic moment, kind of just reenacting it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Filling that through. Eric?
So wonder's a great word, one that I was hoping to use.
Okay.
No, but for me, hearing Dave talk about authenticity, I feel like I actually tend to do a little bit of the opposite. I enjoy pushing my shooting style, and in particular my edits, towards the edge of almost feeling a little surreal without coming off as a fake, too edited photo. So I enjoy finding that boundary line between how much can I push the color, the light, the vividness, like the neon look of the photo, and really grab people's attention eye without being too aggressive or too sharp on the look. So that's always been kind of something I've gone for, is how can I really catch someone's eye. We live in a digital world where people have a short attention spans. They're scrolling through pictures quick. How can I make them pause a second because I caught their eye on something in my photo?
No, I love that.
And that's one other thing when it comes to my evolution in posing and capturing those moments. I used to shoot with a lot of strobes, and a lot of people started following me when I was shooting with flash, and I've kind of got into more natural light photography simply because I can focus more on getting a great shot, using different angles, talking to them more, and just moving around, just being more spontaneous with my photography than having the light set up at one spot and kind of working around that. That's kind of why I've been going into more natural light photography, just to focus more on the emotion in a photo, like you said.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's just an incredibly empowering thing to be able to tell your story visually through photography. We just have a really short amount of time before we close out, and maybe in one sentence you could offer some advice or a challenge to all the photographers that are in our B&H community. Maybe we can start right here.
Yeah,
with you,
sure.
Dave.
When smartphones and cameras became so ubiquitous, there was this kind of uproar, like, oh, if everyone's a photographer, no one's a photographer. And I think if everyone's a photographer, everyone's a photographer. And I think that when you participate in the craft of photography, you have a much deeper appreciation for it. So I'm finding that there's never been a better time to get into this. If it's something that you're interested in, just dive in, start with your smartphone, work your way up until you can, afford something bigger and better. But you don't need much to participate in this creative world, and there's enough room for everybody. So join us.
Yeah,
Erin?
I kind of want to add to that, and my followers will not be surprised to hear me say this, but don't forget to let it be fun.
Yeah.
Don't forget to let it be fun. Don't lose your fun. We tend to get so caught up in like the technical specs of things, and all the pressure that exists today on social media. Just let it be fun.
That's awesome.
I think that if I could become a photographer, anybody can become a photographer, because I never had a creative bone in my body. I picked up a camera 5 to 6 years ago, and if you want to do it enough, you can learn. You can self-learn on YouTube, and I think that it, like Dave said, you can see the world differently. You definitely see the world differently now. When I travel or when I go anywhere, I see things like, wow, I wish I had my camera right now, But yeah, I think that anyone can do it if I can do it. Seriously.
Awesome.
I would just challenge people to try to find new angles and new ways to see things. I mean, instead of just shooting from, standard eye level and capturing a shot with everyone else on the beach, I crawled into a sewer tunnel once to get the sewer tunnel framing on a classic beach scene, and that was one of my favorite shots I got. So be creative, shoot from the ground, shoot from up tall. Don't be afraid to try new things.
It's amazing. Well, I want to thank you all so much for coming and sharing all of your work and your insights, both in photography and for the brand new Sony A7R III. Thank you all for watching at home. I'm David Flores. Thanks for watching.